Good morning, everybody. We're live here from the birdhouse, and it is mid-March, which means it's time to start talking about nesting season. So the days are definitely getting brighter, they're getting longer. It's starting to get warmer, although it was in the 20s this morning, but we're going to have a nice 50 plus degree day here, at least in Western New York, with the days getting even nicer as we roll on. So we'll be talking more about nesting in general as we go on through the month and into April when a lot of songbirds start the nesting process. But one of the earliest nesting songbirds that we do have here are bluebirds. So that's a great place to start because bluebirds do have some specifics as far as they are concerned when it comes to nesting and attracting them to your backyard. So today we're talking about how you can attract bluebirds to your yard using houses and food and water and a little bit more. So as always, if you have questions, you can throw those in the comments. You can just say hi. And we also love to know what kind of things you're seeing. So absolutely put any kind of sightings you have in those comments. So here where I am, and where probably most of you guys are who are watching right now, we have what's called the Eastern Bluebird. So we're on the East Coast, and we've got this little guy here. There are 3 different species of bluebirds in the U.S., and I'll show you those. But then there's also some other birds. I thought I would get started by showing some other birds that are blue that sometimes get confused for bluebirds. One of the most popular birds in the backyard, they can be kind of polarizing, love them or hate them, are blue jays. A lot of people can sometimes mistake bluebirds for blue jays. Blue jays are quite large. They're very loud. They've got that nice loud squawk, and they've got that big crest on the top of their head. So the bluebird, especially our eastern bluebird here on the East Coast, has a lot of chestnut coloring on its breast, the male more so than the female, but blue jays don't have any of those. So blue jays are a totally different bird. There's also what are called indigo buntings, and these will come to backyard feeders sometimes, especially during migration. They are a migratory bird, so they're not here in the winter months, but they'll come back in the spring around the same time as the orioles start to show up, and they like to eat different seeds. So you might see them coming to your bird feeders if you have things like sunflower hearts out or millet or even Niger seed they'll sometimes eat. So they're not a bluebird. Again, they don't have any of that the chestnut reddish color on their breast. They don't have any white on their breast. They're just all bright blue. And this is called an indigo bunting. Also not as common as the bluebirds would be. There are tree swallows, which you might see if you are putting out bluebird houses and you're able to attract some bluebirds to nice open areas. You might also find you're getting tree swallows, and I'll show you a bit about them and their nesting behavior as well. They have a bright blue iridescent back, but a really, really white breast, and they're seen flying over fields or over water where they will pick insects up right out of the air. So really fun to watch, but they have definitely a different hunting behavior than the bluebirds do. Bluebirds are kind of the sit and wait. They'll just sit up high on a perch and look for bugs and kind of dive down on them, whereas the tree swallows will fly through the fields all day long looking for insects. Same as the barn swallows. So if you've got any large structures around, like a nice large gazebo, you might find that you're getting barn swallows coming to nest. They have a totally different nest than the bluebirds do. They don't nest in cavities or in houses like bluebirds do, but they will definitely nest on structures, and they build their own nest that's almost like a mud nest on the side of those structures or up in the eaves of those structures. And they are blue like the bluebirds are, but much darker blue. And they have a very forked tail, which you can see here in this picture when they're flying around getting their insects. You can really, really see that forked tail of the barn swallows. And sometimes the barn swallows and tree swallows, you might have both of them at the same time flying around and hunting and getting some different insects and other species of swallows as well, depending on the habitat. So then there's also a couple other bluebirds, things like belted kingfisher. Now, belted kingfisher, you'll find them around water. So probably not in the same exact habitat as your bluebirds, but if you're by any kind of water or a pond, you might also be getting bluebirds and belted kingfisher at the same time. But belted kingfisher look quite a bit different than the bluebirds are, but they can be blue in color. So if you just kind of get a quick glimpse of them, it could be mistaken sometimes for a bluebird, but bluebirds are more of a bright, bright blue. And this is the belted kingfisher is more of a slate blue, I would say. They've got a nice big bill, and they are always on the hunt for fish and things like tadpoles. And if you're lucky enough, this would be a pretty rare bird to see, especially in your backyard. But again, you never know. A cerulean warbler. So we do have cerulean warbler that come through here during migration. This is another migratory bird. So they'll start rolling in usually around May with the big, big push of migrants that come through. Montezuma Wildlife Refuge has a pretty good population of cerulean warbler in the summer, but they've been seen in Cobbs Hill Park and Washington Grove. So you never know, you might come across a cerulean warbler, but they are quite different than the bluebirds, and they have different characteristics among the bluebirds also. So those are some other blue-colored birds that we do have here in the area. And depending on where you live, you might have some others too. There's things like blue grosbeak. I'll show you the different types of blue birds that are out there, the technical bluebirds as well. But this is the kind of habitat that bluebirds like. So it can be a little bit difficult sometimes for people to attract them if you don't have some open space. So they do like wide open spaces. If there's perches around, that's great. Things like fence posts, things like trees and small shrubs scattered around the field. That's good because they do like to perch and kind of look around their habitat to look for things to eat. So if you don't have an open area or a wide open area, it can be tough to get the bluebirds because they do have that specific habitat requirement. But that being said, more people are starting to see them in their backyards than ever before. So we get reports every year from people who have never seen a bluebird in their life sometimes, and they're starting to get them coming to their backyard. So not completely surprising. Their populations were in big declines in the early to mid 20th century with the introduction of things like the European starlings and house sparrows that are also cavity nesters. There was a lot of nest site competition. Bluebirds were experiencing and still are experiencing habitat loss. There was widespread use of pesticides. All of that led to a big population decline. But at least in the instance of the eastern bluebird, their populations are quite healthy now. They have rebounded really, really well. And although there are still things like nest site competition, which we'll talk about a little bit, there's been a lot of conservation efforts put in to helping the bluebird population. And you can do that yourself by just doing something like adding a bluebird box. So this is the eastern bluebird range. So they will be throughout most of the eastern US in scattered places. Wide open fields, like I said, are a fabulous place to look for them. Even if you're out taking a drive, if you are passing farm fields, look up at the telephone wires or the power lines. You can see them sitting on the power lines a lot of the times too. So they're pretty widespread along the eastern part of the United States. And then there's two other species of bluebirds. There is the western bluebird. If you are out west, and this is their range, again, some pockets out in the west. And then there's also the very beautiful mountain bluebird. And the mountain bluebird is also more of a West Coast bird. So there are the three different species. If you are trying to attract Western bluebirds as opposed to Eastern bluebirds, a lot of these things I'm going to tell you are very similar. The big difference is going to be the Western bluebird has an entrance hole for its house that's just a little bit bigger than that of the Eastern bluebird. Everything else is about the same. So you can still use these tips for your bluebird, for attracting bluebirds to your yard, even if you're out on the West Coast. So there are some different things you can do to help attract them to your backyard. Same kind of things we talk about a lot when we're talking about attracting different birds, wildlife to the yard. Give them food, water, shelter, a place to raise young, and you will be all set. So their habitat can be the hard part for most people if they don't have that right habitat. You might never get a bluebird, but here are some simple things you can do in your yard to just see if they're out there. First of all, bluebirds love bird baths. Even in the winter months, we hear this a lot, that if people have been putting out heated bird baths, they've been getting bluebirds coming to them. So adding some kind of a water feature, if you don't have it already, putting out a bird bath is great. Thankfully, we're getting away from needing the heated bird baths. But in the wintertime, they do come to them. Some bluebirds, at least where we are, migrate south for the winter, but some do stay all year round. So putting out a heated bird bath is great, not just for bluebirds too, but for other birds in the winter months. It's hard for them to find shallow, unfrozen bodies of water that they can drink and bathe in. So heated bird baths are great in the winter. But as we get into the spring and summer months, you can add any kind of bird bath, any kind of water feature is great for them. And moving water is always good. We have these solar fountain inserts that you can put inside bird baths. There's a solar panel on the top, and when the sun hits it, it will power a pump, which makes that the fountain go. And moving water does attract more birds. Birds are attracted to the sight and the sound of moving water. And so that can really help bring in more birds, not just bluebirds, but just birds in general. So water is a very, very simple thing that you can put out in your yard to attract bluebirds. Bluebirds are also cavity nesters. So if you look closely here in this tree, there's a little bluebird head sticking out. So they will nest in hollow trees. They will nest, of course, in birdhouses. They're known to nest in tree stumps or fence posts. They don't mind being more exposed to the elements. They don't mind the sun hitting them. They don't mind rain hitting them in their nesting cavities. So even if it is a stump that's pretty exposed, they're still known to nest in there. So you can provide them with that by putting out birdhouses. And when you're putting out a birdhouse for bluebirds, they do seem to have a preference as far as what way that nest box will face. In general, it's not 100%, but it has been found that bluebirds do prefer a nest box that faces east. So they've done studies and they show that their preferences are east, and they go east, north, south, and west as far as order of preference. So if you're putting out a bluebird house and you can only face it north, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get a bluebird. But if you can face it east, that will just help increase your chances. And as far as birdhouses go, and we'll get into this more when we're talking about just birds nesting in general, what makes a bluebird house different than other houses is going to be the dimensions of the house. So the hole size especially is really important. Bluebirds, at least eastern bluebirds, need a hole size that is 1.5 inches in diameter in order to fit in. But if you're talking about a smaller bird, like say a chickadee, they only need an opening of a nest box that's about 1 inch and 1.1 inches. So they need a smaller entrance hole to be able to fit in. So the smaller the hole size is of the house, the more it limits what can go inside. So the thing with bluebirds are, because that opening is 1.5 inches, not only can you get bluebirds in it, but you can also get things like house sparrows, which can be difficult for people. We'll talk about house sparrows a little bit soon, how you can keep them away. But what dictates one house over another, what makes one house different from another, is usually going to be the entrance size and then the dimensions of the house. So we have all kinds of different bird houses here. If you've ever been to the store, we have small wren houses. Wrens only need, starting a house that's only 1 inch in diameter as far as the hole size go. They can nest in something that small. And as you go up in size, we have things even large enough for screech owls or for kestrels to nest in, which are significantly bigger houses, but they've got larger cavities and they have larger entrance holes, more of a 3-inch entrance hole in order to fit inside. So woodpeckers will have pretty large houses. Bluebirds have probably kind of like your standard, if you're imagining in your head just a birdhouse in general, pretty standard size birdhouse. That's the size that bluebirds will nest in. But we have a ton here at the store, and we have them on our website too if you're looking to shop for some bluebird houses. Another thing to keep in mind with nesting in general is that birds do like a house that is secure, that doesn't move around a lot. So putting the nest box on a pole or something that is a structure that doesn't move is really key. Poles are great because it can help keep predators from climbing up. So we have what are called Bluebird poles, which are super, super easy to install. This is what I have most of my houses on. They come in two parts, and you put the leg in the ground. It's just like a shepherd's hook. You can just stick it in the ground. And then there's holes up at the top, and it comes with screws, and you just put the screws through the pole into the back of the house, and then you put the top piece, you put that piece on the base. It's so, so easy. It's so easy to move if you want to. So I love these. They're just called Bluebird poles. Super, super easy to install your birdhouses. Really doesn't take much time at all, which is awesome. Another thing to keep in mind are sometimes predators do raid nest boxes. So you might want to put on what's called a baffle on those nest box poles to keep things like squirrels or raccoons from climbing up and going inside and pulling out the eggs or the nestlings. They are known to do that here and there. So if you do have that issue, absolutely put a baffle on that pole to keep the predators out. Another way predators can get inside, if they can access that birdhouse, is by chewing around the entrance hole. Sometimes they'll do this to go inside to use it themselves, like squirrels will do this in the wintertime. They'll roost in larger nest boxes. Woodpeckers are known to do this to make that hole big enough for them to fit inside. So if you're having this issue with your nest boxes getting destroyed, or at least that entrance hole getting destroyed, you can put little plates over the top of that entrance hole to keep things from being able to chew through it or peck through it to make the hole bigger. This is especially important if you have, say, a chickadee box and you want to keep it a chickadee box. You don't want to have birds make the hole big enough where you can get sparrows fitting inside of it or woodpeckers fitting inside of it. You can absolutely add these plates of different sizes to the opening of the house, and that will keep the entrance hole the perfect size that you'd like. So we have these in different sizes. There's bluebird house sizes, there's chickadee sizes, nuthatch, wren sizes, so you can kind of customize your bird houses that way too. And then this is showing a raccoon who is raiding a bird house here. There are some different ways besides the baffles to keep those predators out. Putting these what are called bird guardians on the outside of the nesting cavity can help as well. These are little tunnels that get screwed onto the outside of the box. And what happens is if you've got a raccoon or a squirrel that's trying to reach inside that box and get to the eggs or get to the nestlings, this just makes it so they can't reach inside and down into the house. So this can also help keep out some of those predators. And there's a couple different versions of those. So between the baffles and these tunnels, you can keep out some of those mammal predators. It's always very important too when you're selecting any kind of birdhouse to make sure you get one that is easy to clean. And at the end, I'll show you my favorites that I have found are super, super easy to clean. I've been using a whole bunch of different ones. I've been testing them all out. And I do have some of my favorites that I'm kind of biased on. But you also want to make sure that it's easy to clean out because you never know what's going to be inside. You definitely want to clean those nests out once the young have fledged. You want to clean your nest boxes out every year. You can do it as soon as the babies leave the house. So if you're able to time it correctly, once the babies leave, you can go in there and take that nest out. It can be hard to time it because bluebirds can have 2 or 3 broods a year. So sometimes they'll just start real quick again after the first brood has left. But at least once a year, you want to clean out those houses. And we have a lot that just have doors that you just flip down a little screw and then open up the top or the front or the side of the house. And it makes it so, so easy to clean. And usually we talk about cleaning out just the old nest and the old debris, but you might find other things in there too. Here's a wasp nest I found in one of mine a couple of years ago. I just finished cleaning out a lot of my nest boxes a couple of weeks ago. I found one had a few dead birds in it from the season before that they just didn't make it. And so you definitely want to make sure that you look inside those to clean them out at least once a year. So you can do it in the fall is a good time, or if you haven't yet, I would absolutely do it now. This is what a bluebird nest looks like. They use a lot of long, thin grasses in their nest building. It's a very neat and tidy nest. Not all birds have a very neat and tidy nest. They have blue eggs. They're in the thrush family, like robins, so their eggs kind of look like robin eggs. And here's some more examples of some bluebird nests. These are some from my nest boxes, and you can tell they're not a huge nest. The one on the left, actually, that nest box has some wooden blocks in it, which make the nesting cavity shallower. So that's why it looks a little larger than the other. But just kind of a simple grass nest is what they will build inside these houses. And they will have 1 to 3 broods a year, or 1 to 3 rounds, if you will, of babies a year. Each brood can be anywhere between 2 and 7 eggs. And the more mature the female is, usually the older the female is, she tends to have more eggs per brood. So that's a generalization, but that's pretty true. She will sit on those eggs for anywhere between 11 and 19 days. So that's the incubation period. And then those eggs hatch. And then it's only about 17 to 21 days, so about 3 weeks or less, until those nestlings are out and into the world. And when those eggs hatch, they're completely helpless. So they are blind, they hardly have any feathers on them, and in less than 3 weeks or less, they will become full birds that can fly and be out in the world. So it doesn't take all that long for them to go from egg to out in the world, which is pretty amazing. And this is what a nestling looks like. So this is an immature bluebird on the left, and there's the male with a delicious mealworm feeding the baby. And both male and female will feed the nestlings. The males will tend to feed more during the time where the female's laying on the eggs. He'll come and feed her. And once the eggs have hatched in those really early days, both male and female will feed the nestlings, and even when they're out into the world. And what's really cool is with the multiple broods that these birds are having, the nestlings from the first brood and second brood, they will sometimes stick around and make a family group and help raise the nestlings and the fledglings of the next broods to come. So it's a whole family dynamic that will happen here with the bluebirds, and they tend to stick together all that winter too, and then kind of disperse in the spring. So those nestlings will stick around with the parents for a while. They'll help raise their little brothers and sisters, if you will, and then they kind of disperse as it gets closer to mating season right about now. So there are lots of different types of birdhouses out there. There are our best-selling one, and the one I've had the most luck with personally with attracting bluebirds, is this one right here. This is a sparrow-resistant bluebird house, and there's different types out on the market, but this one, there's something about it that the bluebirds just really seem to like in the field that I put out birdhouses, and they love this one. I don't have a lot of issues with sparrows, but I have a ton of tree swallows. And I get bluebirds when I put out these houses with this rectangular entrance. The bluebirds just go into them like crazy, and the tree swallows seem to like the houses with the circular entrance. What makes these sparrow resistant are a couple of things. The first being the entrance is rectangular, and bluebirds don't mind a rectangular entrance to their birdhouse. And it also has a shallower nesting cavity than most birdhouses, and inside it does have a little block of wood that you can put inside to make that nesting cavity even more shallow. And bluebirds don't mind a shallow nesting cavity, and sparrows tend to like something deeper. So it's just not the specs that the sparrows prefer, and that can help keep them out. Nothing's 100%, especially with sparrows, especially with nature in general, but it can really help to keep them away. This is what the house sparrow looks like, and they get a bad reputation for their antics with bluebirds. They are cavity nesters, so they do compete for cavities with the bluebird. They are an introduced species, so they're not a native species, although they've been here in the US for a long time now. And they're known to sometimes raid those nest boxes, poke holes in the eggs. Sometimes they're known to kill the nestlings or kill the bluebirds that are in the house, the houses. So they do have a bad reputation. That being said, wrens do the same thing too. I don't hear a lot of people blaming wrens for this kind of behavior, but they absolutely do it as well. So keep that in mind. It's not just the house sparrows. But especially because they're a non-native species, people tend to want to keep them out of the house and entice the bluebirds, which makes sense. This is what a house sparrow nest tends to look like. They're not as neat as the bluebird houses. So there's grasses in there. There's usually feathers. There can be some debris. Sometimes you find cellophane or pieces of plastic inside of them. Sometimes they'll build nests on top of each other. Like this is two nests built on top of each other. So if you open up your nest box and it's really messy inside, it could very well be a house sparrow nest. There are different things you can do to keep the house sparrows out. If they are coming to your nest box, you can put up what's called a sparrow scarer or sparrow spooker. And what those are these shiny reflective pieces of mylar that will hang above the birdhouse, and they can look very different from one another. A lot of the times people have to DIY them, but we do carry one now that you can install easily on the top of your birdhouse. And the idea with these are that birds don't like shiny, reflective things. So if you are having birds nesting in a place you don't want them, you might see these around wineries, around vineyards. There's all these shiny reflective things around. It's to scare the birds away. And how these work are, once you have the bluebirds in the nest box, so they have to be there already, and once they've laid an egg, they tend not to abandon the nest. So you install these after the bluebird has laid its egg, and it'll help scare other things away from the nest box. So the bluebird will still keep coming, but if a sparrow comes by and is kind of interested, it might see this reflective tape and it'll scare it away. So we do have these now. They're available on our website. They're called sparrow scarers, and you can absolutely use those to scare the sparrows away. So like I said, just with the sparrow resistant birdhouse, it's not 100%, nothing's 100%, but it can really help, and we've had good feedback about those. So that is one way to keep sparrows out. And then here's the last one. This is another style of birdhouse. And like I mentioned earlier, bluebirds don't mind being more exposed to the elements. They'll nest in tree stumps, so they don't mind the sun shining on them. They don't mind getting rained on here and there. This is a birdhouse that has a top that lifts off, and underneath there is a nice grate, so nothing can really fall inside and hurt the bird or hurt the nestlings, but it exposes that nesting cavity to some more of the elements. It exposes them to the sun and to the rain, and sparrows prefer an enclosed nesting cavity that doesn't have that. So this is another way to help encourage bluebirds, but keep those sparrows out of the nest box. So we have both of these houses in stock, and actually now we also have one that has both of these features, that has that rectangular entrance, shallow nesting cavity, and open top. So if you feel like you've tried it all, we have those and the sparrow scarers to help keep the sparrows out. So we're trying our best, and that's, with some combination of those, you might have some better luck with attracting bluebirds and not sparrows. Another thing you can do to help alleviate nest site competition with sparrows, or even with other things like tree swallows or wrens, is mount your houses in pairs. And mounting houses in pairs will just give more spots for birds to nest, so there's just not as much competition. Bluebirds tend to defend a territory of 1 to 2 acres during breeding season. And so putting more nesting sites, more nesting cavities close by can help alleviate some of this nest site competition where you might get bluebirds in one house, tree swallows in another, or bluebirds in one house, wrens in another. So it just gives them more options, places to nest, so they're not fighting with one another so much. It's like giving kids separate rooms so they're just not on top of each other and driving each other crazy. You want to install, when you do nest, put these nest boxes in pairs. Sometimes people put them back to back so they're super close, but you don't want to put them any further apart than about 15 to 20 feet. So you want to make sure they're within 15 to 20 feet of each other, but not further, because then it doesn't really help alleviate the nest site competition. And when you're putting out birdhouses, these are some other cavity nesters you might also get. So you saw this bird earlier in the presentation. This is a tree swallow. Tree swallows do like the same type of habitat as bluebirds, so wide open spaces. I get a ton of tree swallows in my nest boxes, more so than I do get bluebirds, but they're really cool and fun to watch. And they're gorgeous in the sun. The way the sun hits them, they're so iridescent. But this is what their nest looks like. So they use some grasses, and they also use a lot of their own feathers in the nest building process. So if you open up your nest box and it's filled with a lot of feathers, most likely you've got yourself some tree swallows nesting there. Oh yeah, here's a couple of my nest boxes. They've got some grasses in there and then some feathers. These were both used by tree swallows. And I should mention here that you can see it can get kind of gross and dirty inside the birdhouses. We do have bird feeder and birdhouse cleaner that you can use to help with some of it, to help clean some of this. We've got sprays, we've got wipes, and I find that that's the easiest way to clean some of these, especially with the wipes. It has all natural enzymes in there that just helps break down some of the gunk that is in the birdhouses. You can easily just wipe it away and then throw away the wipe, and you're good to go for nesting season. So not the most glamorous thing to do, but it is important for the health of the birds and the nestlings. Another type of bird you might get in your bluebird houses are going to be wrens. Wrens will nest in really small spaces. They'll also nest in really big ones as well. And wrens inside the houses will put a lot of sticks. So even if it's a huge cavity, they will fill that thing with sticks. So if you open up your nest box and it's full of sticks, probably from a wren. And they've got some interesting nesting habits as well that we'll talk about when we get more into just birds in general and birds and nesting in general. There's 2 species you're likely to see in your nest boxes, at least where I am here on the East Coast, house wrens. And that's why I had a whole bunch of house wren nests this past year for the first time. And then Carolina wrens. And these are both small brown birds. They've got long tails. The Carolina wren has a very distinctive eye stripe in the top of its head above its eye. But really fun birds. They sing a lot. And then there's also chickadees. You might get chickadees in your bluebird houses, and they will build nests using lots of moss. So if you open up that house, it's full of a lot of moss. That's going to be a chickadee nest. So you might find different things in your bluebird houses. So all the more reason to put up a few more to alleviate some of that nest site competition as well. So that is the one way to attract them with nesting sites. You can also attract them with some food, and bluebirds do eat lots of insects, and their diet really consists of insects and berries. They don't really eat a lot of seeds like a bunch of our backyard birds do. So they typically don't come to seed feeders so much, but they do come to mealworm feeders. And here are a couple of bluebirds dining on mealworms. Mealworm feeders are super simple, just little cups. We have different types, and I'll show you some different types that we have. You can give them freeze-dried mealworms, which are dead, or live mealworms. They do prefer live mealworms, and now that it's getting warm again, we will be having live mealworms. We're getting our shipment in tomorrow. It's always a very exciting time when we get our live mealworms. You know, spring's on the way. Maybe I need to get out more, but then there's also freeze-dried mealworms, which you can feed them all the time. And those you just sprinkle into a feeder. You can even mix them in with your regular bird seed if you want to just put it out there and see if you might get some bluebirds coming. And you might just get them landing on your feeders in general to check out what's going on. This is a video that Patty, the other owner of the store here, had from her feeder. I think it was last week. It'll show the date in the corner. She's never seen bluebirds in her yard so much, but it came to her Beak View camera feeder, which we saw here, the bird feeders that have the cameras in it. And if you've got your volume up, which I assume you do, you can hear the call of this male bluebird, which is really cool. So I'll play this for you. So sometimes birds, it seems like if you've got a lot of bird activity in your yard, it just on its own attracts other birds. So if I don't have my feeders full all the time, don't really have that much. I might have a couple here and there. But once I fill my feeders and I've got a whole bunch of sparrows there and a mix of other birds, then is really when I start to see a whole mix of different birds start to show up. So it seems like the bird activity in general brings more birds in. And so even just if you have regular feeders up in general, you might start to see some bluebirds coming in and looking interested. So the first day she saw just the male bluebird, and then, oops, let me hit the play button. And then on the next day, this is the female, and she's more of a powder blue color. She's not that bright blue. So she had both the male and the female. And so odds are that is a pair. And it looks like they're going to her feeder that has some sunflower hearts in it. So they do eat some sunflower hearts, which are the inside of the sunflower seed. So even if you just have your regular kind of sunflower seed feeder out there, you might get the bluebirds too. You never know. Here's some more pictures of bluebirds at feeders. I think these were sent in by Bob, who I see is on here commenting. Bob Henry here. He has bluebirds coming to his suet feeders. So here's some just kind of basic suet cake feeders. And then these are suet log feeders that you put log-shaped suet inside of. He had a bunch of bluebird activity there. Some more bluebirds coming to a suet feeder that has some seeds in it in the wintertime. And then they love this. This is Ed's picture, who's also on, it looks like, commenting of the bluebirds coming to the bugs, nuts, and fruit logs. So these log feeders and these seed logs are great for bluebirds too if you're trying to just kind of throw it out there and see if you have them. I would absolutely try this bugs, nuts, and fruit log. We do have one that is treated with hot pepper called Flaming Hot Feast. And they both have the mealworms in them. They both have the sunflower hearts. And you can see it was a big, big hit from the bluebirds. These have been some popular feeders for the bluebirds. This one especially, it's small, it's inexpensive. It's called the Petite Bluebird Feeder. It has a plexiglass top, so it keeps the elements out, keeps the rain out, keeps the snow, if we do have snow still. And the bluebirds fly into the holes on either side. They can eat their mealworms and be on their way. So these are all feeders that are especially meant for mealworms. So this Petite Bluebird feeder has been super popular. This one's called the Mealworm Domed Feeder. It is just kind of a mesh tray that has holes in it. So it has drainage capabilities, so the mealworms don't get waterlogged. It has a roof, and it even comes with a little sample of freeze-dried mealworms. This one's only $27.95, super popular. The Bluebird Flower Feeder. This one's my favorite. I like this one. Super simple. You might have this in the orange version for Orioles, and you just put mealworms inside of it, and you hang it up. We have little weather domes that can go over it if you want them more protected, and just a cute little feeder, nice perching room for the bluebirds. And then we also have cups that hang. We have cups that stake in the ground that you can put mealworms in to attract the bluebirds. So no matter what your situation is, we have some kind of way that you can give them the mealworms if you are trying to attract them with that. And then as far as houses go, these are the ones that I've had the best success with. And I find that they're really easy to open. So I've tried some different ones that are, they kind of, I don't know, they're not impossible to open, but you might need tools, or they just take a few extra steps to open. And if you've got a bunch that need to be cleaned, it can be kind of cumbersome. So these are my favorites. I talked a lot about the one on the left. That is the sparrow-resistant bluebird house. Not only does it keep the sparrows out from me, but there's something about it that the bluebirds absolutely love. I don't know if it's the opening or the cavity size or what, but that is what I'm going to be adding more of this year in my bluebird meadow. So really excited about that. And then also the recycled plastic ones I found are really great too. They don't have that that same opening, at least this one doesn't, but they're so easy to clean out. Sometimes the wood over time will warp and it can get a little bit harder to open and close the sides or the front to clean them. But now with these recycled plastic every year, super simple to open and close. So those are really good too. And then we also have some what are called observation houses, and they have plexiglass inside of them. So you can open up the side and there's a plexiglass barrier there. So you're not affecting the birds at all where you're, shuffling their nest around or anything like that. It's totally contained, but you can peek inside and you can look at the nests. You can see if the nest has been built. You can see how many eggs. You can see the nestlings. So we have one that's called the Observation Bluebird House that just opens up on one side, has the plexiglass, and then to clean it, you have to unscrew. There's a little screw on the bottom of the plexiglass. You just have to unscrew that each year to take the nest out. But then we also have this one on the left here that has an observation side on one side, and then the other side opens up completely to clear out the nest. So that's my favorite of the two. So that's what I'll be replacing my just single open side house with a double opening. So that is the two-sided bluebird house. Really, really cool, really fun. The plexiglass does get kind of gross, I will tell you that. So you do have to kind of wipe it down once a year because it can get kind of cloudy with all the different debris and things going in and out of the house. But those are my favorite bluebird houses. And I'm sure if you guys have your favorites, absolutely put them in the comments. Looks like we've got a lot of comments, so that's really good. And if you have comments, put them in the comment box. Questions, let us know if you've got bluebirds nesting, if you've got any bluebird activity or other bird activity. Love to know that. When I was cleaning my boxes out a couple of weeks ago, there wasn't any nesting activity happening yet with the bluebirds, but there were some perched on top of the boxes, kind of calling dibs. So it's an exciting time of the year. Let's see. Oscar's on says, hello, the bluebird I saw was plump and grabbing food to go. Yeah, they are kind of a plump little bird. They've got that thrush body type. And Oscar says, I also have goldfinches getting quite yellow already. Yes, one of our staff members saw a goldfinch over the weekend that had one bright gold feather, she said. So it's happening. All of the signs of spring are showing up. Christian is on and says, have one nesting right now with a camera, 5 eggs waiting for them to hatch. Awesome. Yeah, bluebirds are some of our earliest nesting songbirds. So depending on where you are, you might already have them starting to nest in your area. Christian says about his house faces west, but it faces a huge field. He also says, had a snake once come in after I cleaned it out. I was shocked. Yeah, so depending on where you are, that's another predator that you might get trying to come to the houses. Are snakes, especially black rat snakes, are known to climb very, very well, especially if you're further down south. They're more common. We do have them here, but just not as much as down a little bit further south in Carolinas and south of that. There are snake baffles you can put up. Regular baffles can help keep them out, but there are what are called snake baffles. And the snake baffles, they kind of look like regular baffles. Let's see if I can get back to the baffle picture really quick to kind of describe what they look like. So the picture on the left here that has the just kind of typical squirrel baffle or raccoon baffle, it's all enclosed, so it's all metal. But the snake baffles usually have holes in the top, and they have some kind of like a grid that lets light shine in, because apparently the snake will climb towards the light, but if it's enclosed like this, they sometimes will climb around it to get up and around into the house. So snake baffles have some kind of holes in the baffle that make light shine through, and apparently that helps keep them out. So there are snake baffles are an item, and we can get them. We've had them before, especially for purple martin houses that are on really tall poles and have multiple chicks inside. We've had the snake baffles before, but they're very tall, so they're quite large. But yes, we can get them. So might be something to look into. Ed, who's had some of his pictures here in this slideshow, says bluebirds usually only visit our feeders and bird bath in the coldest, snowiest parts of the winter. But this year, much to our joy, they're still stopping by for a snack and a bath. All right. The weather's been kind of like back and forth too. Maybe they're confused and think it still is winter. But maybe they'll nest this year. That would be great. Christian says, yikes, that raccoon. Yes, the picture of the raccoon raiding the nest box. It does happen. Oscar has asked what kind of snake, Christian, and Christian said, not sure, a hungry snake, I guess. He entered the night after I cleaned it out. So depending on how big that snake was, my best guess would be black rat snake, but other snakes will eat eggs also. So Bob is on and says, oh, that reminds me, I need another scarer. I put up a new box. Yes, the nice thing about the sparrow scarers or sparrow spookers, let's see, they might have been earlier in the presentation. You can put them up after the fact. So you don't have to put them up right away. In fact, you don't want to put them up right away until you have bluebirds nesting and bluebirds laying their eggs. So you can always add them as an accessory after the fact, after you get your whole Bluebird system set up. And we do have all the hardware that you need. We have all the houses. We do have all the accessories. We've got the nest guardians. We've got the sparrow scarers. We've got the little plates you can put over the entrance holes. So we have it all. And you can, of course, always shop here at the store, or you can visit us online on thebirdhouseny.com to buy any of that kind of stuff online as well. So it looks like that's everybody's comments and questions for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. And let's see, we've got a couple more comments actually. Christine saying, thank you. Can't wait to upgrade food and shelter for my bluebirds. Glad I found your channel and website. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and feel free to share this video with all your friends and family and all the other bluebird enthusiasts you might know. And we appreciate your support. And this is a very fun time of the year. It just gets better from here. So we start with the bluebirds, we go into nesting season, and then it's hummingbirds and orioles. So it's a really fun time of the year. We've got lots of events coming up, both in the store, and we've got bird walks. We've got all kinds of fun stuff. So not only can you buy things on our website, but you can see all of our events. Some are in store and in person, some are online. So there's a mix for everybody, no matter where you are, you can participate. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Saturday with another broadcast. And until then, have a great day and good luck with your bluebirds. Bye-bye.